Randy, how's it going? Great to see you.
Excellent. Great to be seen. Thanks so much for joining us. It'll be fantastic for sure. So everybody, thank you so much for watching. This is episode 133 of the Tech Sales Insights. Really excited to have Vlad Rozanovich
You got it. There you go.
today.
Yep.
Sorry, I only know. He's got a fantastic executive job at Lenovo. He's senior vice president and president of North America. Also recently took over as the head of the Infrastructure Solutions Group, which is the Worldwide Data Center Group. Also does some cool stuff with the I call it the traditional Motorola mobility business as well. So definitely a lot of great businesses there that you're running. Our title topic is perseverance in a down market. So really great timing for that, obviously. We're sponsored today by Decision Link, who's the value selling sponsor of Sales Community. So thanks to that Decision Link. And as always, brought to you by Sales Community. For those that are members, thank you so much. For those that are not, you can go to Sales Community and go to the link that Tucker just put up there, salescommunity.com/summer-free. And we've got a real impressive group of advisory board members like Vlad as well. So Vlad lives, kind of goes between Cincinnati and Raleigh. Interests besides work and family are, he's got 3 young kids, which is fantastic, and enjoy those times, 7, 9, and 11. Right. And enjoys being an assistant coach for their sports, and also does some cool family traveling with his wife, Steph. So by way of introduction, we had worked together when I was at HP, and you're running the AMD business, and we did a whole bunch of joint go-to-market things. And certainly that it's been great to see the AMD business take off, which I'm sure you had a huge hand in that. But also have some people that know you well give some intro comments. So from Bill Swales, who we've known both for a long time and runs a big piece of the business. Says Vlad is of high integrity, leads from the front, customer obsessed, an ally for DEI, great listener. He's authentic, partner centric. He's someone who helps those in need, and he finds the right balance between strategy and execution. He knows how to inspire others. And I know many, including myself, who would run through the wall for him. So pretty cool there. Awesome. And then from Stephen Hagler, who's a channel leader at VMware, said Vlad not only knows the business very well, he takes the time to engage personally to build both the strategy as well as drive execution up and down the organization. He was always invested in our success, even as partners in his business. Even as recent as this year, Vlad took time away from a large keynote to engage with me about opportunities that he felt might be interesting for me. So pretty cool stuff there for sure. So
I'll tell you, Randy, those are 2 of my favorite guys in the industry. I've known them for a long time, and it's wonderful to hear those thoughts.
Awesome. Fantastic. So jump right into the questions. So you were at AMD for a long time, but talk about your maybe first job after Boston University, and that's BU, not BC, for those that are.
That's right. Yeah. So, going back now, went to Boston University, majored in computer engineering, did a minor in business. I actually thought I was going to go play basketball at BU, and was in touch with Coach Brown during my senior year in high school. And it was interesting. Went up to Boston University, first week in school, met with the coach, and he, coming out of his office, he's like, make sure you stay in shape until the season starts. And, another coach sees me, he says, hey, are you on scholarship for basketball? I said, no, I'm actually on an academic ride. And he says, hey, I'll put you in the best shape of your life in 8 weeks. And it was the head rowing coach. And I ended up, shockingly, I never even knew what rowing was. And I actually joined the rowing team, and for 4 years as a varsity athlete, kind of did that while while I was in school for engineering. But as you said, Randy, so, after Boston University, moved out to California, said, hey, I'm going to go work in Silicon Valley, hired on to AMD back in 1996. And so, started out with AMD in something called their technical sales engineering program, did some rotations within the organization into things like commercial marketing. And then finally they said, hey, it seems like you know how to walk and chew gum. We're going to put you out in the field. And So AMD moved me out to Raleigh, North Carolina, covered a whole bunch of embedded accounts. I remember there was an account, Gilbarco, they did gas pumps, and they were the first person to put TVs in a gas pump. And I remember working that design win, and it was like the coolest thing. So spent a couple of years down there doing these OEM and embedded type accounts. Moved on to the IBM account team, and before you knew it, I was the head sales manager on the IBM team after everybody kind of left above me. Focused in on IBM for a long time. And then there was a guy, Kevin Knox, who came over to work for AMD, and he ran the commercial business. And he says, "Hey, I want to move you either to New York or Boston and call on all the Wall Street accounts and kind of talk about the message of technology to financial services firms." And so spent a few years really focused in on those financial services firms. And from there, ran Wall Street, ran financial services, then ran Americas for commercial, and then ran Americas for everything for AMD. So I covered commercial, consumer, graphics, embedded, did that for a while, and then moved over to the data center side. And for my last 4 years at AMD, I actually covered the data center market, focused on accounts like Amazon and Oracle, Google, Microsoft, and many of the other large corporations or large government institutions doing things within the data center space. So that was my career at AMD. It's kind of crazy. It spanned 24 years, but learned a lot and did a lot of things there.
That's great. And then how did you get over to Lenovo?
Yeah, great question. And so this is one where Lenovo was actually talking to me for about 5 years, where they were trying to get me to come over. And Matt Zielinski, who was a peer of mine. When I ran commercial at AMD, Matt ran consumer. And then when I ran the Americas, Matt ran all of our multinational accounts. And so Matt and I were on the same staff, reporting up into the chief sales officer, John Byrne, who's over at Dell now.
Yeah.
And so we worked on the same staff for years and years. And maybe about 5 years ago, 6 years ago, Matt said, "Hey, I need you to come over to Lenovo to run the commercial business." And I said, "Nah." I said, I still think AMD's got some legs, and decided to stay. And that's when I was running the data center business. And a couple of years later, Matt called me back up and said, "All right, big boy, I'm not losing you this time." But there was something interesting, right? It wasn't just coming in working under Matt. Lenovo is going through a transformation on how do you, being a number one PC provider in the world, but also having businesses like Motorola, Mobility, as well as the Infrastructure Solutions Group, which is the data center portfolio. And Matt said, "You know what, Vlad, I want you to not only just run PCs for North America, but I want you to create a culture and run an organization that makes us look like one face to our customers and one face to our partners." And I said, "You know what, that sounds like a challenge." It was also a bigger opportunity where, probably had about 1,800 people working under me. And I said, "You know what, now's the right time in my career to go run a large organization and be part of something that can drive to, hopefully somewhere between $15 and $20 billion as a region."
That's awesome. Yeah. I mean, nothing better. I mean, just think about the impact that you have on all their lives. I mean, yeah. I mean, you're sitting there at kickoff and you just see it's, them and their families, and, that's the real impact that you're making. Right.
Agreed. Yeah. It's one of those people first philosophies that I've always had, which is if you put people, it was an old saying that we used to live by in one of my previous jobs, where it said, people first and products and profits will follow. And it's still something that I hold true to this day, where if you take care of your people, if you invest in them, they can just do amazing things.
Absolutely. And you have for your FY24, your theme is one team, one dream, full throttle.
That's right. So one team, one dream. And that actually goes, it aligns to that statement you made, Randy, about, why did I come to Lenovo? And it was the concept that Matt and YY, our CEO, pitched to me, which is, we want to be one face to our customer base. We want to be one face to our partner base, because the organization ran in silos. It was the PC division, the data center division, the services division, and the Motorola division. And what they said is they wanted somebody to come in to be the face of, how do you put all of that together? How do you engage with our partners to create this kind of what we call now this Lenovo 360 approach, where it's not just about selling, smart client solutions. It's about selling an entire portfolio, and it's about selling the entire company on why do partners want to do business with Lenovo.
Yeah, awesome. And I should have said earlier, so for those watching or listening along, feel free to ask any questions or make any comments along the way here as well. And we have, as always, Tucker behind the scenes pulling them up for us. So Tucker, thanks for your help. Now, you also recently visited the inside sales team in Morrisville. And I know that inside sales is really important to your go-to-market engine, right?
Yeah, no, there's, it's interesting. When we look at our entire organization, it's not just the outside field sellers that make everything work. It's the inside organization, the support staff, the day-to-day work that they do in order to really kind of support not just the outside sellers, but really have that interface to the customer. From a Lenovo perspective, we actually use multiple sites across the Americas to support the North America business. So we've got our inside sales team in Building 6 down in Morrisville, as you mentioned, but we also have teams in Costa Rica. So that's a team that we engage with that really focuses in as the inside sellers and kind of that selling team to our partners and some of those smaller resellers. And then we also use the team in Argentina for engagement when you look at things like lower cost jurisdiction and how do we add more people, how do we add more headcount to make sure we have a better touch point out to our customer and partner base. We actually use that organization as well. So yeah, when I look at my team, Randy, it's it's a team effort, and inside is as valuable, if not more, in that customer engagement, in that partner touch point, in that support of our lead sellers and global managers. And how do you service the customer and how do you service the partner as best as you can?
Awesome. That's great. So I got to ask you, it must be pretty funny for you having Intel as a partner.
It's crazy. 24 years at AMD. It was the one thing, even when I go back, though, I always tried to have good relationships with my Intel counterparts. I still remember there was a day where Jay Parker was the North America president of Lenovo. And me and CJ Bruno were in the same room because we were sponsoring something. And I walked right up to CJ and I said, hey, I just want to introduce you. I'm the guy who's your competitor, who's trying to win as much business as you are. And, even now, I talk to guys like Greg Ernst almost on a weekly basis. Just an amazing group of people. They've run an amazing business for a very, very long time. And in fact, one of the things I think is I think in some cases Intel's tried harder to get to know me over the last couple of years and make sure that they service what Lenovo needs, which is a really nice thing.
That's great. Yeah, I caught up with CJ a few months ago, but classic industry legend for sure. So Absolutely. We have a question here from Eric Giesel. Thank you, Eric. Given the current economic challenges, how has Lenovo's service business, SSG, helped address customers' challenges?
Great. Well, Eric, first of all, Eric's a new hire to Lenovo, so welcome. We actually knew Eric back in his HP days as well. Just a tremendous asset in understanding the as a service business. And Eric actually brings up a good point, and it's one of the things that I was actually going to spend a little bit of time talking about later is when we start thinking about what adds value to our customer base. We're not in the business. None of us are in the business anymore of selling devices to customers. We're in the business of selling outcomes. We're in the business of selling solutions. We're in the business of listening to customers to understand where their pain points are. And one of the things that we've done, which is our solution and services group that Eric's actually part of at Lenovo, is how do we make sure that we look at our customer base and start delivering those solutions, services, what we call true scale, which is our business to engage with customers to say, hey, if you don't want to have that typical buy-sell relationship, let's talk about business relationships that may be as a service. And so they could be on the client side. They can be device as a service on the client side. They can be on the data center side. If you look, some of the obvious choices are things like data management as a service. When you think about the storage needs of all customers and companies, it continues to exceed every day. And a lot of companies don't understand what is the storage growth that they need to prepare for. And so true scale device or as a service is really something that we at Lenovo look at as how do you change the conversation to be a product sale to an outcome sale? And our SSG organization that Eric's actually part of is exactly lined up there to have those type of conversations with our customer base.
Awesome. Great question, Eric. So thanks for that. So reminder, those watching or listening, feel free to add any other comments or questions as we go here. So our title topic is perseverance in a down market. So certainly something that's very relevant. So I would imagine, customers are an important piece when you think about that.
Yeah. It's, one of the things that I look at, Randy, is, customers go through cycles. We had a COVID fueled environment for so many parts of our business over the last few years. If you look at client sales, they skyrocketed, both consumers, buying gaming PCs, home machines. When schools were on lockdown throughout COVID, you had education and Chromebook sales going through the roof. As everyone's entered into these hybrid work environments, what they saw was that they needed PCs with better, higher quality audio, visual display capabilities. Home offices became virtual offices with large visuals and monitors. And so you saw this big boom of business on the client side. Then you saw this big boom of business on the data center side because so much of the supply chain was locked down for so long. And even from a Lenovo standpoint, even though we have manufacturing locations, all around the world, 9 different sites where we do procurement and manufacturing, if there was just one component that couldn't get out of Asia, it would create a lockdown. And so, the question then is, how do you engage with customers in situations where you don't have a product to sell, or maybe the market or the market economy is actually starting to really pull back? And one of the things that I really leaned into my entire organization is, when times get tough from a customer standpoint, there's a couple things that I want everybody to do. Number one, change the narrative. Change the narrative of what you're talking about with that customer. Give them an opportunity to talk a little bit about their needs, like that what we just talked about as a service. When we think of the conversation of as a service, it's easier to have when a customer may not be buying. Because, typically you're like, hey, what's my quota? What do I need to sell? How many units do I need to get out the door? How do I make sure I execute to some of those contracts? Well, in a market downturn, one of the things that I view as probably the most important thing is get closer to your customer, understand their needs, have the conversation of maybe those emerging technologies or emerging business practices like outcomes and solutions around as a service. That's the perfect time to actually start talking about, what are those things you want to do to change the narrative?
Awesome. And partners, obviously, really important when you think about that as well, right?
Absolutely. A partner ecosystem, when we look at it, 85% of our business goes through partners. Partners are our lifeblood, plain and simple, period.
Awesome. And you can't do any of that without without the people and having a great team. So I'm sure there's a lot of things that come into play there.
Yeah, well, and that's the other thing. When you start looking at downturns in the market, and things get tougher, budgets get tougher, operational budgets get tougher. Now that's the time to invest in people. When I look at the efforts of making sure that our people are trained, are educated, are on the cutting edge of technology discussions, on the cutting edge of sales conversations. One of the things we pride ourselves on is diversity and inclusion within our organization, and making sure that, that's the time where you invest in all of your people, so that they want to stick around with you. When times bounce back, the thing that's most important is keeping them educated, keeping them up to speed, showing them that you care and you love them. And you're here to support them, right? That's one of the things that I've always kind of viewed as a servant leadership model. I'm here to make sure that my teams are successful.
Awesome. So kind of 4 things, words of wisdom from Vlad: perseverance in down market, double down on customers, importance of partners, change the narrative, and investing in your people.
That's right. Yep.
There you go. You heard it here. And we've got a long question or comment here from Matt. Matt says, this type of end-to-end commitment to customer excellence that does not diminish in value, no matter who you are interfacing with as a customer or channel partner, is so critical to successful organizations. Absolutely. Indicative of why Lenovo has such a refreshing culture and works so well with the channel. Love these Tech Sales Insights discussions. Thank you. The business of selling outcomes experience, change the narrative, transformational mindset, to get away from a transactional relationship during a challenging time in the market. So maybe great points there, Matt. Appreciate it. But talking about culture, I mean, how do you? It's Matt. I don't even know how many how many employees does Lenovo have globally, and then how are you able to kind of put your stamp on the culture kind of for your team?
Yeah, that's a great point, right? So from a Lenovo perspective, we've got about 55,000 employees globally. At this point, I've got into my North America organization about probably in that 1,800 range. But you mentioned it earlier. I've taken on the worldwide infrastructure data center organization as well, and that's adding on another 1,200 people. And so to keep 3,000 sellers motivated, to keep them focused on partners, to keep them focused on customers, that's it's not a small task. But there's kind of a philosophy I've always used, Randy, which is never lose alone. We are a big organization worldwide, but the sales team and the customer facing, the partner teams, they're relatively small compared to the entire organization. And one of the things that I really tell them is, we're a team. We pinch hit for each other sometimes. Sometimes you bring in the closer when necessary. Sometimes you give it to the running back to get across the goal line. The reality is you don't want to lose alone. And if you feel like there's a threat of losing alone, that's where we kind of need to double down. And that's where you regroup, and that's where you say, hey, this is what we need to go do. And I'm always willing to be part of that. If the team wants me involved and being the quarterback, I'll be happy to do that. If they want me to be a blocker, I'll be happy to do that. So for my philosophy, never lose alone is one of those things that it's part of my culture. It's part of kind of what I've instilled in my team. There's an old sales exec that told me something that I still value to this day, which is I'll never ask you to do something that I won't do myself or I haven't done. And that's also something that I think is really important from a sales executive standpoint, a sales management standpoint. People who get told from the ivory tower on here's how to do it, or here's what I need you to go do, without actually trying to do it themselves or saying, hey, I'd be willing to do it myself. I think it just builds a lot of credibility into the mindset of the people when they know, their leader is actually going to be kind of, managing from the front lines.
Absolutely. So thanks for that, Matt. And then Michael Brewer asks, how can TrueScale help clients reduce their CapEx expenditures? And maybe for those that don't know, explain what TrueScale is.
Yeah. So TrueScale is Lenovo's as a service offering. It could be on the data center side, storage side, client side. And so there's a couple things here, right? Not everybody has a one size fits all footprint of what their IT data center needs are, or IT client needs are. And so really what TrueScale is it's a way to actually, take it beyond just leasing, but really kind of creating a productivity on demand. And the way Lenovo does it on our data center side, we measure everything through our xClarity console where, we actually bill via power usage to say, okay, you know what, if you turn it on and if it's being utilized, that's when we'll charge you for that asset. It really helps, the cloud guys started this game a while ago where it said, okay, you know what, I'm only going to, you as your company grows, as your startup grows, here's how you actually, fulfill that need. Well, what we've done is we've taken that to a different level to talk about things like, what about hybrid cloud solutions with a OpEx model? Or what about, putting product on site and actually paying for only what you use, or owning everything end to end. So you own everything from asset deployment to imaging to white glove service, all the way through asset recovery on the backside. all as a service model. And so when I look at it, today Lenovo probably manages about 1 million client devices on a worldwide basis, where we own everything from asset deployment to asset recovery using ESG requirements. And so those are things we do on the client side, but on the data center side, it's that model of giving a customer that flexibility so that they can kind of adjust into it rather than being a fixed expense. It really goes a long way in how we service our customers and partners.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Michael. And Kevin Quinn asks, are there any vertical industries that lend themselves to as a service more than others?
Yeah, Kevin, what I've noticed is that anybody who's kind of been born in the cloud, right? It's those types of customers who are the early adopters to say, hey, I'm willing to have this scalable model. But then you have this dynamic of, okay, what about privacy? What about security? What about generative AI within your four walls of an infrastructure where you want to make sure you keep that? Or what if you live live or work in a country and your IT infrastructure is governed by regulation bodies? To me, one of those things that I've seen is as a service, it started off with these born in the cloud type of companies. But then when people have figured out that there's regulations needed, especially in some of those areas that I've mentioned, they love the idea as a pay as you go, but I want to own that information within my four walls. And I think security, especially in data center and storage, is such an important part of the as a service model, where you can kind of have that infrastructure in your four walls, but have a model of something like what the cloud providers have offered over the last decade.
Awesome, great, thanks. So again, others, thanks for those that have asked the questions or comments. Anybody else, feel free to keep them coming in. So now, over the years, I'm sure you've had several mentors. Any kind of one or two in particular, and any specific advice you've received?
Yeah, it's I've had a few mentors over the years. One one by the gentleman named Kevin Knox. He was at AMD for a little while, but New Yorker, Yankee fan. I grew up outside New York City too, and so we kind of had that connection. He was a big sports guy, played football at RIT. But one of the things I always learned from Kevin is, it's okay to put pressure on your team. It's okay to demand more of them. It's okay to say no. And so it's one of the things that I learned on, how do you manage especially in areas where your team is growing. And it's that love of what he gave me, but also kind of being tough. It's okay to be tough on your employees. It's okay to ask tough questions. He's one person that comes to mind. Another one is I've got an executive coach that I've used for years, Tom Triolo. That's great. His son just made it to the majors. He was in the minors for about a year and a half, and he just got called up to the Pirates. I think he's batting like 311.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah, after his first 20 games. But Tom's always been a huge asset to me as well. When you think about kind of the what if scenarios, what are you doing right for your people? What are you doing right for the company? Think outside the box. Sometimes it's hard for an inside source to kind of ask those questions. And so I do recommend, especially a lot of up and coming sales execs or business leaders, make sure you have somebody maybe outside of your direct path that you can go bounce important questions off of, because it gives you an outside perspective, and it gives you it gives you an opportunity for exactly what Tom does for me, which is, he's a coach. He hasn't been a sales leader at a Fortune 500 company, but what he does do is he guides you and he asks those questions, which maybe you may not see. And so those are some of the things that I've always seen in my mentors is, how are you tough on somebody to demand more out of them? But how do you make sure that they're giving you questions on a different perspective on how you're running your business?
Absolutely. And then something I always like to suggest too, to anybody in the go-to-market side, where it's sales or marketing, but get, one or two customer executives as well. So you have, certainly could have a go-to-market executive at a different company, but then you're having it with a customer. And a lot of times, as I'm sure you found, and yeah, I found, if you're mentoring somebody, you learn just as much, if not more, than what the mentee learned. So it's not just, all about the person that's being mentored. The person that's providing the guidance, learns a lot. So it's an awesome win-win. And the best way to do it is you just ask.
That's right. That's right. And even at Lenovo, we do things. There's a couple mentor type programs we have. One's called our Feed Forward program, where entry level managers have access to top level execs in the company. In fact, I was a mentor to a Japanese woman out of China who was running our Chrome business, and she just started becoming a mentor. And the amount that I learned from her about different markets, different products, and the amount she learned from me is, it's amazing to have those types of programs where you're a mentor to somebody, and it could be outside of your, and most importantly, it's outside your direct line of management. It gives people perspective, and it gives you perspective because you hear things that maybe you're isolated from.
Yeah, absolutely. So important there for sure. Mm-hmm. So what about if there's kind of maybe one or two things or advice that you would give to your younger self?
It's a great question, Randy. So number one is, treat people how you want to be treated all the time. It's something that I've always instilled in my career. It's it's something that my mom taught me at a young age, but it's also something that I would keep reminding myself. So even though you may hear it from a parent, you don't look at it until about 20 years later, where you're like, you know what, that actually makes a lot of sense. So that's something I keep reminding myself. I wish I kind of took that more seriously in my early part of the career. So that to me is a real big one. I would say the other thing is don't sweat the small stuff all the time. And this being in athletics, your whole life and with your boys, you need to be able to bounce back. If you have an adverse, something that's an obstacle, something that's held you back, you have to have a quick mindset to say, you know what, okay, that happened. How do I move on? And use that as an experience, use it as a learning experience, so you never kind of fall back into that trap again. But being able to bounce back quick, don't sit there and think about the what ifs. Say, hey, okay, that was a decision we made. It didn't turn out maybe how we wanted it to. I learned something. How do I make sure I bounce back and do something different, but do it quickly and make sure it doesn't hold you back as part of your initiatives.
Awesome. So much wisdom there. Now, what about moving on? The importance, sales ops has always been important, but now kind of rev ops and the tools and analytics and everything that's out there. It's crazy, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's overwhelming, right? But it all has value, right? Ultimately, what do we want to do as tech leaders out there? Tech moves so fast. And it's probably one of the reasons that I've been in tech my entire career. I love the fast-paced environment it gives you. But how do you make sure that you are engaging with partners, engaging with customers in the right way as fast as you can? As we start seeing this transformation to more digital, more analytics, being able to have data and act fast on that data, and having partners and customers be on a digital journey where they get what they need at an instantaneous rate, but then they have access to a subject matter expert or an executive when they need to. That's important, and it's something that I've looked at as when we as Lenovo look at how do we better engage with customers, how do we better engage with partners. It really is. It's at the speed of technology, and we shouldn't be afraid to look outside to say, these tools will help us enable a better interaction with our customers, a more fulfilling interaction with our partners. Those are things that we look at all the time. Maybe sometimes, Lenovo has a big IT organization. A lot of times we fall into the idea of, do we build it or do we buy it? And so the most important thing is making sure that as a leader of a region and as someone who's running sales and marketing and operations, making sure that those tools are being used to make the most informed decision, not only for the business, but also for every customer and partner situation. So for me, it's an important part of how we manage, how we execute, how we drive fast, and how do we take share ultimately.
Oh, that's awesome. So say if there's some kind of, I'll say, rev ops or, sales and marketing SaaS companies out there that want to sell, I'll say to Lenovo or to sell to you, what things do you particularly look for?
Yeah, analytics, right? So, I mentioned generative AI earlier on the call. There's no question. Every CIO I've talked to, Randy, in the last 6 months have said, "Hey, my board or my CEO is saying, what do I need to do to create a Chat GPT type feature functionality within my environment?" I view it as the same way, right? The market intelligence, customer intelligence, getting data. About what a customer wants to do or a partner wants to do, even before you can realize it yourself. And so when I look at some of the sales op tools that are starting to get out there, it's the ones that help accelerate that journey. It's the ones that help you be more analytical. It's the ones that help you kind of analyze, okay, a customer has said this keyword 6 times in a 30-minute conversation. What are you going to do to go make sure that you are now taking a solution based off of that concern that they may have brought up? And so for me, if someone was to sell to me at this point, it's how do you enable more intelligent conversations? How do you track data more effectively? How could you forecast, even in parallel to the inputs that your team is putting into the CRM system? How do you forecast your business from a revenue, a margin standpoint, more accurately than you have before? All those types of conversations are things that would be interesting to me on driving business within the region or around the world.
Awesome. Very cool. And what about from a lead generation perspective? Are there certain things that you do?
Well, it's interesting. Lead gen is probably, one of the biggest things that we're doing right now at Lenovo is, I talked to you about kind of the siloed businesses and this concept of one Lenovo and Lenovo 360 that we're doing. One of the most important things is when you have organizations that may be touching different parts of a customer, having those lead generation passing internally is probably the most effective lead passing that you can do, right? Because it's warm lead to warm lead. It's maybe different business units that are focused on different parts of a customer, but then can come together. For me, that lead generation within an organization, leveraging your assets, right? I mean, even you think about how many connections each and every one of us has to different people in the industry. It may be somebody you're selling side by side with came over from another company and they have amazing LinkedIn connections with somebody that at a corporation that you're trying to get in the door of. Well, taking advantage of some of those navigation type tools on who has those connections, who has those warm introduction possibilities, is probably one of the most important things that you can do. The other thing we've been doing at Lenovo is looking at, what alternative routes to market do you look at? In the retail market, for instance, we see small businesses now starting to buy even more through retail. I know it's not necessarily lead generation, but it's how do you change your mindset to say, hey, I'm going to use some alternative routes to figure out how I service certain customer segments. And so those are all things that I keep an eye out for. But lead generation, lead passing, acting on it is the most important thing. By the way, if you get a lead passed to you and you don't act on it, it's a waste of money. It's a waste of time. Making sure that your management team is really enforcing the fact, follow-up, touch points, engagement. It's a key part of being successful.
Absolutely. What was I going to say? Oh yeah. So on, if you think about, you mentioned a lot of different sales leaders and different CEOs. Are there kind of one or two others that you kind of call out that you especially respect?
Yeah, it's being in technology, there's a lot of things that I look at, and I'm always amazed. Every CEO I meet with, I always learn something from. Whether it's like a Chris Leahy at CDW or Joyce Mullen over at Insight, or the Schwab brothers over at D&H. I learn something from every meeting I'm in with them, or even Lisa Sue, right? I spent a lot of time under Lisa when she was there, but also time under Rory Reed and Jerry Sanders and Hector Ruiz. Every CEO I've worked with operates their business differently. And so I do a lot of listening when I'm engaged in some of those CEO type meetings. I see organizations that are all trying to do something that even we at Lenovo are trying to do, which is how do you satisfy customer demand more effectively, more efficiently, and how do you become true partners? And it's something that I think about in every CEO meeting that I have is what are we, what am I doing? What is Lenovo doing to go help enable the journeys that our partners or our customers are on? To me, those are really real important data points. And so when I see CEOs like the ones I mentioned that I admire and I look up to and I learn something from, they have tougher jobs than what I have. And if I can model some of my behavior, if I can model some of my thinking off of the way that they do it for their businesses, it's an awesome thing to see.
No, that's awesome. So for your kind of sales team, you mentioned your kind of the marching orders, kind of what you're doing, how are you doing it? How do you really make sure kind of from that one team perspective where you got inside sellers, you got your sellers, you've got people that are focused. You mentioned that, about the leads. So if I'm selling, you're kind of as a service offering, and then there's another offering you want to have a sell, kind of how do you really make sure that happens? And can you kind of formalize it? Comp plans always are a pain to change. So the best way is you want to drive the behavior through compensation. So are you able to kind of really affect that, or sometimes, especially big companies, you need like a 6-month runway?
Well, it's a good question, right? And it's probably a topic of conversation I have more than you think. How do you motivate sellers through compensation? There's always going to be your baseline revenue margin components, but then how do you make sure you put that incentive there, whether it's through a spiff, a retiring of quota at an accelerated rate? How do you pay, as a service model? One of the things we see is, to close an as a service contract, many times it takes over 9 months, but in many cases, some of our sellers are only on 6 or 3-month quotas. And so there's this thought process of, man, I don't even want to have that conversation around true scale because I don't know if I'll be able to hit my near-term targets. And so those are always questions that are kind of burning at me is, how do we ensure we have the right sales compensation models? How do we incentivize in the meantime? I'll tell you, one of the things we do is when we look at areas of opportunity for those businesses that we want to grow fast, making sure that there's compensation structures aligned to ensuring that there's always either the stick or the carrot. And you kind of want to do a little bit of both, right? You want to make sure that there's enough of a stick to say, this is the future of where we need to go, but there's enough of a carrot where people are going to willingly do it. And for me, it's probably the thing as a leader of a geography, the face of the company in North America, the leader of kind of our worldwide organization. What's important to get those the seller's mind share so that what they're presenting isn't necessarily what's best for them at that 3-month quota period, but what's best for them to keep that customer for a 1, 2, 3-year time frame. And that's one thing that I always try to stress to my teams is, act in the moment, but always think about the future. Because if you don't think about the future and if you don't plan for yourself to kind of think about it, one of the things that I always, when people kind of ask me, they're like, Vlad, when you wake up, what's the one thing you think about? Do you think about that day's revenue attainment for a region? And I said, no, actually what I do is I think about where do we want to be a year from now? And what actions do I need to do to make sure I'm lined up for where we are a year from now? Then what actions do I want to do to make sure that we're lined up a quarter from now? Then what actions do I want to make sure we're lined up to do today? And so for me, it's that think back process for where do we want to go? Where's, as Roy Reed used to say, you need to skate to where the puck is going. You can't just sit there and say, okay, well, here's where the market is today. You need to kind of set the direction to where you want to be a year from now. And then you kind of backtrack it in order to say, here's how we want to fulfill that strategic goal.
Awesome. So great. So time flies here, but you've been a fantastic guest. Thank you so much.
Oh, thanks, Randy.
So since we've known each other a bit, I'll ask you, and if there's anything you don't have to say, but any PG Randy stories?
So it's funny. I think of two things, Randy, and when I kind of think about who I model myself after, you actually had a couple influence points in my career, in my life. One of which is, I guess I was running the Americas business, or the commercial business at AMD, and you were leading up HP sales. I remember being in Vegas, and you were basically kind of doing your sales kickoff. And I remember you being in the back of the room and sprinting to the stage, and you probably couldn't talk for about 5 minutes after you got to stage.
5 hours, yeah.
I mean, you were at a full-on sprint, and I loved it. And I said, that's passion. I said, that is a guy who's willing to do everything it takes to get his team motivated and get everybody excited. And so it's funny, but at every sales kickoff that I've run, I always tell myself, don't sprint to the stage. So that's one thing, Randy, that I recognize that you did. And it was great. And the other one was, it was one of these where we were sitting in your backyard with Terry and Dan Belanger and a few other guys. And one of the things that taught me was, to be successful in business, you kind of have to open up, your house to your coworkers. They need to get to know who you are. And having those business meetings in your backyard over breakfast, that to me, it taught me a lot. It said, hey, here's somebody who's willing to open up their life, their house, in order to go partner and be successful. And so those are two things, Randy, that I know you influenced me on, and I'm eternally thankful, so that I'm not out of breath on stage, but also so that I recognize that, this is what we're in. It's about people. It's about people. It's about relationships. And those were two areas where, you kind of taught me something along the way.
Great. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And in my defense, I forgot how far it was, but afterwards I actually went and measured, because we had these kind of back conference rooms as well. So I think it was, upwards of like a quarter mile or something. And then also it was in Vegas, right? So you're kind of altitude and all that. So it was, the hard part was jumping on the stage. Everybody thought I was going to wipe out, but I was actually, that would have been really bad. But anyway, you've been fantastic. So thanks to DecisionLink for being our sponsor, and for those that are members of Sales Community, thanks. And if you're not, definitely go check us out at salescommunity.com. And next week for episode 134, we have Michael Wing, who's president at Vast Data, and his title topic is disruption. So that'll be Wednesday, August 2nd at noon East. So everybody have a great week, and enjoy. And Vlad, if you can stay on so we can recap, that'd be great.
Yeah,
and
absolutely,
for your help as well.
Yeah, thanks, Randy. Really appreciate being on here with you.
Thanks. Peter Brennan says, great session, guys. Thank you, Peter.
Awesome.